I remember it clearly. Bert and I were delivering a Thanksgiving basket in downtown Dubuque. It was a cold, dark November evening, and I came home and I was feeling utterly, overwhelmingly fatigued. I had flu-like symptoms for about 3 weeks. That pattern would continue over and over again in the months ahead. 3 weeks sick, about a week well, and then sick again. Never recovered, never again well. My life would continue, of course. We had 2 of our sons still at home in junior and senior high school. I was teaching full-time, lecturing around the country, writing, working on my PhD, and serving on a number of task force and commissions for what would become the New Lutheran Church. I remember one time being in Chicago at such a meeting, and I became so suddenly ill that someone had to drive my car home, and then another person drove me back to Dubuque. The doctor couldn't find anything wrong. What would later become identified as chronic fatigue syndrome has no known cause, no cure, and at that time, no name. It would be almost a year of this pattern until one of the students, actually here at Wartburg, who was from Rochester, Minnesota, said, "Norma, you need to go to Mayo Clinic." And actually she brought the phone number and put it on my desk so I would call. Wartburg, 1983, was going through financial retrenchment. My position was not cut, but the ones of us who remained were working our tails off. But the acting president, Bud Buheim, a dear colleague of mine teaching church administration, said, "Norma, if you were my sister, I would put you in the car and take you to Mayo Clinic." Burton, with many of his burdens of the household and the family, he also insisted that I go to Mayo. He needed to stay home with the children, so I remember taking the Greyhound bus because it was too cold for me to drive my VW diesel engine car. I stayed in a rooming house about 15 minutes from the Mayo Clinics. I remember it was dark and cold, and I felt lonely because I had no idea what was going on with my body. It was right before Christmas, and I remember carolers came through the halls of the clinic. I had for years been a Christmas caroler, but here the carolers were singing to me. It was wonderful, but it seemed strange because, well, I wasn't in the hospital. Was I sick or wasn't I sick? Mayo Clinic could find no known cause, but did recognize that I had some low-grade depression. Not surprising because that comes with chronic fatigue, and it's also a very depressing disease to have. They assured me that the symptoms were developing into a chronic illness. It was real, they just didn't know what it was. Burton drove up and got me and brought me back home. Over the following 3 years, I battled this ongoing illness and gradually got a little bit better. Supportive family and workplace really did help. Meanwhile, there were news reports of more and more people around the country getting sick with this disease. At first it was called Epstein-Barr, but then they found really no connection and couldn't nail down what was really going on. Finally, it was simply given the name chronic fatigue syndrome, a descriptive but really unfortunate name. How do you tell people, no, I'm not sleepy? It's unrelenting fatigue. And particularly because although thousands of men would also develop the disease, it was primarily at that time a disease of young or middle-aged women, and their symptoms were often trivialized.